Okay, this section is on radian and degree measure and angles in general. When you draw an angle, you can sketch it by first drawing what's called the initial side as a ray. Then I have an end point here, and I can draw the second side, which is called the terminal side. Now, just for speaking about angles and how we measure them, let's just pretend that the measure of this angle is 30 degrees. Now, I can also talk of that angle, and I'm going to put some dotted lines in here for an axis, because if I think of going all the way around in a complete circle, you know that that's 360 degrees. And these four sections are called quadrants. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, always named with Roman numerals. Now, I could call this 0 degrees here. This would be 90, this would be 180, this would be 270, and back here again at 0 is also called 360. I measure degrees going in a counterclockwise manner. Now, this is 30 degrees. I could also go around a complete turn and then stop at 30 degrees. The measure of that angle would be 30 plus 360, which would be 390. I could go around 2 times and add 360 to that again. I can also measure angles going in a negative direction. That same angle, let's erase that 360 for a minute here. That same angle, if I wanted to measure it going in the opposite direction, starting at the initial side, back to the terminal side, that would be negative 330. Okay? I could also go around 360 and then stop there, and I could call that negative, what do you think? Negative 690. Negative 690. Angles can have a multitude of names. Angles with the same name are called coterminal angles. So this 30 degrees and the 390 degrees are coterminal. The 30 degrees and the negative 360, all names for the same angle. So you can measure angles by degrees. Now, I can also measure angles by using. So when you talk about radians in terms of angles, a radian is the arc length of the angle. So another way to talk about a 30-degree angle would be in terms of radians, and a 30-degree angle is pi over 6 radians. Those are equivalent. I can talk about the angle being 30. I can talk about the angle and the representative arc length as pi over 6. Now you might be wondering, how do I get pi over 6? Well, we talked about the complete circle being 360 degrees. Well, the circumference of that circle is 2 pi radians. And you get that by finding, you know that the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, right? And if the radius of the circle is 1, if r equals 1, the circumference is 2 pi. That's really considered what we taught when we talk about the unit circle, a circle with radius 1. So if I'm working with a circle of radius 1, the 360 is the same thing as 2 pi. And I can use these interchangeably. I can talk radians or I can talk degrees, and there's equivalents for each. Now, there is a special way to determine or to find radians for any type of degree that you might have. Okay, so we're talking about the circle again. Remember, this was 0 degrees, this was 90, this was 180, this was 270, and again back at 360. I can talk about that same circle in terms of radians. Okay, so 90 is the same thing as pi over 2. 180 is the same thing as pi. This is 3 pi over 2, and this is 2 pi. So we can talk about the circle in terms of degrees or in terms of arc length. Now, so remember I told you 30 degrees was the same thing as pi over 6 in terms of radians. How do you get that? Well, since 360 equals 2 pi, you can solve this by dividing both sides by 360 and get 1 degree equals 2 pi over 360, or 1 degree equals pi over 180. So the conversion for changing degrees to radians is by multiplying pi over 180. If I want to go from radians to degrees, I do 180 over pi. You want to do a few examples? Well, let's start with the 30 here, right? 30 degrees times pi over 180. What happens? Degrees cancel, and 3 into 180 is what? 6. So pi over 6. What do you think 45 degrees is? Times it by pi over 180. What do you get? Pi over 4. All right? Hey, suppose I have pi over 3 and I want to know what the degrees are. Multiply it by 180 over pi. What do you get? 60 degrees. So we can talk degrees or radians. You need to know how to convert both ways. So again, pi over 180 to get our degrees to radians. To get from radians to degrees, 180 over pi. One short way that I use to remember it is when I'm going to degrees, I want to get rid of the pi, so it needs to be on the bottom of the fraction, and then the pi's cancel out. So good luck with your homework.